Reinhardt. 2 more days of growth had shown on the shaved part of Trinian's head. The two were forced again to spend both nights inside slummed-out hab modules. It was the only accommodation available for absolutely nothing, though one had to forego the room service, the bed, electricity, privacy, and sometimes a roof and/or walls. The fortunate aspect was that Trinian could get a full and restful sleep without having to catnap through the night because Bixby, being an android, had no issue with chilling beside his sleeping friend while he processed data. The cyberpunk's incisions were not yet covered completely, as one could see an outline in the lay of her hair on that side. A line between the long and short sides lay straight down the center of her head, like it was an intentional style choice. The point was that she no longer looked like a horror show on the holographic broadcast entertainment monitor. Over the course of a couple days, a tattoo started growing. Spidering out from the new hairline on the short side were light blue lines, only a few millimeters in width, similar to computer circuitry. They split at random increments, spreading to just 2 centimeters under her cheek. The lines all started just behind the ear and extended parallel to each other at an angle out and over the ear. Each line ended in small round nodes, 2 near her left eye, 1 near her nose, 1 on her cheek, and 1 extending towards her neck but terminating near the jaw. Human form androids had a similar effect all over their bodies. Trinian watched it grow to its current state, and she could no longer hide it. Consequently, she got noticed. The look, though clean and hip for rich kids her age, was not conducive to camouflage or going gray. Her new tactic often included using the android as a distraction while she lifted valuable technology items from the richer market centers, using her implant to block alarm signals, bypass security features, or amp up her speed. Trinian's grab-and-dash lifestyle had transformed into shoplifting and grifting. The end of the day found the two with over 800 credits in the black. Using the implant's wireless connection to Bixby for live private communication made their operations more fluid. It normally took a month to make 1/10 what they got in 2 days. Hanging out at the market concourse, as the two of them watched the sun fall below the skyline, silhouetting taller buildings against the bright pink horizon, Trinian asked, "What if I told you I want to get off this planet?" The android shrugged. "I would understand completely. Unfortunately, we do not have the finances to satisfy that desire." The girl turned her back to the sunset and picked her nails with a new dagger she stole in replacement of her small knife. "I want to take Rebecca's ship. More to the point, I want to find Dad. And I suspect that the tablet with all those coded files is on her ship. Positive Dad is in one of those files." She looked pleadingly at Bixby and said, "I have a real shot at finding him if he's alive." The AI agreed that they would need their own transportation regardless. "Truthfully, I am compelled to assist with your desire to take action against Miss Faust. The average Corps soldier is bound to the orders they are given and cannot deviate even if they find that the order is morally objectionable." Trinian nodded. "And desertion has consequences." She thought to herself, Bix was ordered by Killion to help with and even push for anything I did to Faust, she thought. What advice would he give me if Bix could be straight and open? The android added, "On ancient Akron, an adult dragon could sustain itself peacefully for thousands of years, yet some chose not to and terrorized the city-states of the time. The civilized creatures of Akron ruled that violent dragons had to be destroyed." She nodded and thought, "If you do enough bad shit, someone will step up. Stay off the radar and don't kill Faust." It would have been perfect for the girl if morality were as clearly defined as the gods were. Rebecca took Trinian's father, and with that, Trinian's future and her life. Surely that deserved something. She sighed as her own reluctance to kill Faust was a clear sign that the street was beginning to drip off of her. The truth of the last 5 years pooled at her feet, laying Trinian's ugliness bare. She thought to herself, was that price of survival my soul? Who the fuck are you, Trinian Serenity? The sun fled the dusk sky, and the dusk colors followed. Light pollution on the night side of Krakenkurt prevented more than a few stars from peeking through the city's halo. Trinian couldn't sleep that night, so the two spent the time planning to steal a starship, the Reinhardt. While Bix researched the design specifications for the vessel, Trinian practiced accessing different automated systems, information kiosks, cameras, and the like. She became proficient at combining different functions, for example, using the camera to zoom in on herself while she viewed the feed on an information kiosk. Rapid switching between systems took much of the night, focusing on developing brain pathways into superhighways. By the time the sun brightened on the eastern sky, the girl no longer needed to consciously think about her actions. However, by morning, Trin was exhausted. For 10 credits, she grabbed another suite at the Triple S Hilton. On the way there, at the market concourse, the girl shook her head and snickered as she bought a hamburger. It didn't matter if the meat was acquired from a mysterious source, she ate it. While consuming, the girl crafted a message and sent it to Rebecca Faust's open message account. Bixby encouraged the email, saying, "It is vitriolic enough that it could enrage her. That may help Jack steal the golden egg without encountering the giant." The girl nodded. "Just to be sure you message me the moment the ship is secured. I have no interest in prolonging negotiations. I'd like to deliver the final blow as quickly as it was for me." Trin wanted to flip that switch to Faust's sanity, the one that was to change her from what the woman was to what Trinian used to be, Blacklisted. Preparation. Early in the afternoon, after a few solid hours of sleep, the cyborg led the android through a number of streets to a heavy iron door tucked between a blue gutted apartment stack and a pink pleasure module with a neon sign above the module hatch that flashed Buffy's. Trinian turned and kicked the door with the heel of her boot and called out, "It's Squirt, surprise!" There was a long pause, followed by a fumbling, tumbling noise, followed by the sliding of metal on metal, followed by the opening of the iron door and a bald, horned head poking out from behind. Stan's face lit up in joy after taking several previous seconds without recognizing her. "Squirt! Holy shit, come in! Your friend too, come on!" After waving them in frantically, he closed the door behind him before turning to face Trinian. "You look so diff." Once he looked into her eyes, his face sobered instantly. Trinian was crying and stepped in to give him a long hug. She may not have believed in friendships, but Stan was perhaps the only creature she knew and trusted like a friend. Gently, Stan patted the girl, not at all comfortable with hugging, but tolerating it because it was Trinian. When she stepped back and wiped her tears away, sniffling, the girl apologized for the hug. With concern, Stan replied softly, "What happened to you? I heard something bad happened by the old tool shop a wee while back." Trinian laughed uncomfortably. "Here are the facts in rapid fire. Ready?" Stan nodded. Trinian ran through it. Shot in the head, technologically resurrected, hopped up on kick-ass tech, about to fuck up an AI Rico bitch, need the big stuff, have cash. She gestured to the android. "My friend Bixby." Stan stood for a moment, absorbing the key information. From inside his belt line, he fished out an idiot string with a large key attached to it. Laughing sharply, he explained it. "If they get the key, they might as well get my balls too." He laughed again while unlocking the padlock and unstringing the chain from the door. "In here, I've got equipment that even the court doesn't use." He winked. "This shit is so outlawed that just possessing a replica of some of these will land you in prison on an asteroid. So..." The wiry man yanked the chain-link door open and said with a squeak, "You're about to take down AI hunters? I won't ask what led you to that, but because they use some sophisticated shit themselves, you're going to need shielding for you and your friend. The hunters use everything from EMPs to wireless, the exploitation of hardware, and the software defects of various Android designs." Off of one shelf, he grabbed 2 of a couple dozen rings from a small wire box. "Jamming rings. I make these with leftover junk tech and a binding spell. You need to attune for it for an hour before using. You can have them free, but I normally charge $100 a piece." He pretended to whisper, "If you find any AIs that need one, send them over." Stan continued aloud. "Unfortunately, they block all EM signals while you wear them, and they don't block subspace connections." Trinian raised an eyebrow. "Add one, I'll pay for it." "I heard you have an arcane drone?" Stan was about to get that expression that told her that he was about to lie. "Fuck off, Stan, you know you have it. I want to buy that too. It's a key part of the operation." "I'll have to get it from the safe when we're done in here." Reaching up high, he grabbed a dark metallic bracelet, crisscrossed with curious grooves that formed interesting, intricate patterns. "This one is 200 credits and came in from a long-dead legacy civilization a few hundred light years from here. Handing the bracelet to the girl, he explained its use. This will absorb any energy charge from a standard energy rifle. Once it absorbs the shot, it can release that energy in the form of an electromag pulse. When you release the pulse, be sure to hold the bracelet above your head, he demonstrated, so the pulse goes all around you but not above and below. Once the charge is released, you can capture another shot. Activate it with a jewel on the wrist right here, he pointed. Stan went through his entire stock of illegal items. In all, and for a total of just over 500 credits, the two partners got a few useful items, as well as a pair of particle pistols with 6 extra shot charge magazines each. Trinian protested, "No, we don't have that much on us. I hate these things for obvious reasons." Stan looked at her head and said, "You did pretty well until now without one, Squirt, but you have to admit, you're going to need one sooner than later." The girl reluctantly took the particle pistol and tucked it into her left jacket sleeve, where it was held in place by the armpit. The pistol was massive compared to her hand, though not impossible to handle, so the back of the pants carry wasn't going to work for Trinian. Bixby had declined to equip himself with a pistol, but did get a range-enhancing modification for his primary sensors and a replacement hand that could be detached and used for covert purposes. He turned to Stan. "Thank you, Stan, for allowing us to purchase these items. Our mission success prognosis has increased significantly." "All right." After opening a floor safe and removing a small silver ball, the smiling Stan nodded to Trinian, handing her the metallic orb. "You be careful. Have a really good shit for once." She smiled and wanted to hug the creature again, but elected to respect his discomfort. "You too, Stan. Have a good shit, but not too long. I might drop in sometime." Stan only nodded, unable to make a sound at that moment. The iron door opened, Trinian and Bixby stepped out, another set of final goodbyes were said, and the door closed. Trinian knew she would probably never see Stan again. She turned and plodded off, not looking back at the not-a-friend she had for the last 5 years. "I do not understand why one biological would wish another biological a good shit. Is that not mostly decided by diet and health?" Trinian looked sidelong at him a moment before replying. "You're close when it comes to health. If you ate well on the street, that was a good day, and eating well meant that you're going to have a good shit." Biggs was still confused. "I do not understand the relation to your conversation with Stan, as neither of you ate anything." Snickering, the girl clarified, "We shared a good time. Stan was telling me he enjoyed my visit and good luck, and I said the same back. Back when we met, I was starving and probably looked like a zombie, so he fed me a pretty large meal. I was stuffed. The next day I told him that I had a good shit, and he said that too. We just stuck with that as a customary parting wish." After a long pause and reflection, Trin finished in a whisper, "He saved my life." Bixby had done his own research into Rebecca Faust's vessel, the freebooter starship Reinhardt. It was commissioned in 2457 by Argosa shipyards and required a minimum crew of 1 and a maximum of 5. It also had a 300 cubic meter cargo hold, 5 alcove sleeping cots, a medical bay, a kitchenette, and supply storage. It came with a basic loadout of a pair of laterally node-mounted particle cannons, intended for defense against piracy but often used by pirates. The Reinhardt was purchased by a company on Hadrian V and exchanged ownership a number of times before being finally purchased by Rebecca Faust under her business name, Rebecca Faust Holdings. It had been in her possession for the prior 6 years and had logged nearly all its space-time going to and from KT-68 asteroid group. The vessel had a leased berthing under the name of Faust Recovery Services. Bixby positioned himself on the promenade that overlooked Group 4, Berth 10, and kept a watchful eye on the target vessel. The Reinhardt, orange and black, had 3 sections and 1 powerful engine that appeared to be in good condition. The hull had evidence of repeated refills of hull damage from interplanetary debris on its many trips to KT-68, but for the most part, it seemed like a worthy vessel. When he told Trinian, she snickered. "I thank the Redhead Witch for taking care of our ship." Bix explained that without legal ownership, the vessel would never really belong to them unless they could change the starship's transponder codes to reflect that ownership, which was normally done with a quantum decoder. However, with some knowledge, one could, in theory, be able to find a weakness in the system and exploit it. Bixby had a reasonable probability of being successful as he formulated his part of the plan. Trinian raised an eyebrow. Okay, how does that work then? Access to the ship itself can be difficult or quite easy, depending on what model variation the ship is. I could either pick the lock or destroy it. Once inside, a secure wireless connection is established with the Reinhardt's command and control module located on the flight deck. Security credentials are passed to the module, and a unique identification code can then be edited along with the official name. But I have a theory on how I can change the information in the transponder without going through the verification process. I may be able to employ my new assistant. He waggled his fingers, indicating his detachable appendage. When he told her the details, Trinian loved the idea. Rebecca. The flight deck of the Reinhardt was just big enough for 3 seats and a hatch entrance aftward. The pilot, co-pilot, and system specialist positions could be filled or mostly automated for a single operator, all controlled from the pilot's seat. The system specialist station sat on the right behind the pilot, and the exit hatch was behind the co-pilot on the left. Each seat faced a 3-panel gunmetal gray console with ergonomically angled faces. Vital systems had hardwired buttons in case of computer failure, so manual control could be used to operate the space vehicle in an emergency. The rest of the controls were virtual, with the pilot and co-pilot having identical holographic displays and independent controls. Rebecca felt foreboding when she read the title of the email. How's the rapist? As she sat in the pilot's seat, the woman reacted with hostility as she spit out a few profanities. Cranston was a beautiful person. They were in love, and though the business was getting rocky, they were in their own little heaven. That is, until the urchin brat stole a vital piece of equipment, robbed her, and now accused her Cranston of rape. After 2 weeks in medical stasis, Cranston was stable but unresponsive. The wound in his neck from the knife was extensive. According to the auto lab, the knife landed on the spine between the 3rd and 4th vertebrae, doing some damage to the spinal cord that led to vital areas, as well as severing an artery. The prognosis was not good, and it was starting to look like he was never going to be conscious again. As his employer and lover, it was up to Rebecca to decide if and when to pull the plug. With a heavy sigh, she opened the email in her goggles and read, Dear Rebecca Haley Faust, I knifed your child-raping boy. I feel nothing for it. I have 1.2 million credits of your business account. It must be very dry by now. Meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. in the same street where you baked a hole in my head. I have your money, you yet live, time to settle out. Sincerely, Serenity. If it were only the money, the decision would have been a simple one. The email changed everything. It meant that the one who stabbed Cranston, the one who Rebecca shot that was dead to rights, wasn't dead. Additionally, the brat was calling her out and her Cranston of rape. What changed? Rebecca asked herself as she dropped her goggles off of her face and wrapped them around her neck. This tastes like Killion's brat, and if he's involved, he did something to work her into some scheme, maybe even weaponizing her. Somewhere in her deep-seated memory, the deal she made with Killion caught up to her. Has he been playing a long game for the last few annuals? A significant piece of the puzzle dropped into place, and the woman could easily remember the father of the girl. His face was ingrained as a haunting reminder of her moral shift into unworldly dealings. And then there was the money. It was hard enough balancing the books. The android recovery business was in decline, and more clients opted for basic robots rather than pursuing a more sophisticated model. Losing over 1 million credits after mortgaging the Reinhardt with a core financial institution wasn't going to help by the end of the annual, as the Reinhardt would belong to the core banks. Rebecca was considering shifting completely over to the creature trade. The outer worlds had demand for slaves, as technology was difficult to find that far from civilized galactic proper. She was already shin deep in the business anyway. Recently, one of her top buyers urged her to work for him under a full-time contract. Rebecca politely said that she would think about it. Maybe it was time to change her mind. The weapons lockup was 2 sections down in the central corridor. Rebecca made the trip slowly. A few wall panels were removed and stored elsewhere, exposing some components and wiring underneath. She smiled and patted the walls, saying, I don't know what this means, old friend. Don't wait up. She stopped at the carbon fiber closet with a 10-digit pad and punched in her code. The lockup responded immediately by opening the door. Some air escaped from inside with a puff when the seal was broken. Inside, there were 3 slots for 3 rifles. 2 were filled, but the middle one remained empty. The first rifle was a ballistic sniper with a 5-shot clip magazine. Even though you would obliterate the brat's head, I'm going to go with biggest dickest today. Rebecca reached for the larger gun, the one that had been used to bring down a dragon 2 years prior. She pulled it off the mount and closed the door. Biggest dickus was her prize weapon. It was an antimatter cannon with 1 charge, with the capacitor bank taken directly from a battleship broadside gun. It was a very massive charge, to be sure. Rebecca built the weapon from scraps she had collected over the past few years. The only drawback was its firing rate of 1. It had to be interfaced with a main reactor to recharge it, which was a tricky operation as there was no way to properly monitor the rate of charge or how much charge there was at any given time. Rebecca used the vibration of the side of the weapon caused by rapid pulsation of magnetic moment of the charge flow. However, for Rebecca, a single shot was usually all she needed. She chose antimatter because the recoil was minimized even with the power of a starship gun. The woman intended to erase the girl completely from existence, just like she did to Tarsal the Red's head. Rebecca did not sleep. She didn't care even if she was able to shut her mind off long enough. Instead, she relived the good times with Cranston over and over again. They were making plans for settling. Cranston was more serious about it, though Rebecca was not fully ready yet to retire the business. But she was open to the prospect a bit later than Cranston was pushing. Eventually, 7:09 rolled around. The woman got out of the pilot's seat and walked to the medical alcove. She looked at the readouts to the right. Her eyes turned red, and her sinuses became congested as she looked back at Cranston. With injuries of his nature, only magic would have had any chance. However, the Reinhardt was low on fuel for the fusion drive and almost a week's worth of volatiles for the reactor. There was no time anyway. She had gotten him into stasis too late, and she knew it. He had bled out too much, and there was no way that the medbay synthesizers had enough raw organic material to replace it all. Only a resurrection spell at that point would bring him back to her heart, and a mage with that ability was an ultra-rare occurrence. Reaching out, she touched the glass with a caress and breathed in sharply. "She dies, sweetheart." She smiled warmly at his frozen body. "Or I'll be with you soon." She removed the necklace she got at the shop that fateful morning. Placing a kiss on the little gold heart at the end, she split it in half as it was intended. The twisted chain came unraveled, such that there were 2 necklaces, each with half of a whole heart. Rebecca Faust hung one of the 2 necklaces on the pod over Cranston's face. The android hunter then steeled herself, hefting biggest dicks to her head, and left to vaporize a murderous brat. After sending an email to Trinian informing her that Rebecca was on her way for their business meeting, with a rather beefy non-standard weapon, he realized that the first part of his operation was not going to be that difficult. When the android walked up to the drop ramp near the aft section, just before the engine module, the first clue was revealed. There were bilateral air hatches on the port and starboard sides and on the anterior habitation section. That particular vessel was an intermediate model that added a starport hatch for the tandem flight of multiple frigates. It was also the same model that had a non-standard change made to the ramp access module just before being sent to production. With confidence, he approached the ship. Security at the berthing was light. It was up to each ship owner to take care of security of their own property. Spaceport security was meant for the spaceport, spaceport storage, and spaceport operation facilities. Starship security was your problem. So, no one challenged Bixby when he started poking around what was clearly not spaceport property. Policy seemed to be very clear on that concept. The Corps heavily regulated the starship building industry with mostly useful policies that they actually enforced. One of the policies that related to this particular situation was the one concerning ramp panel access for spacewalkers during emergencies. For example, if you just finished patching the outer hull and there's a particular nasty cloud of debris heading right for you, the last thing you want to struggle with is punching in the right personal access code while you're shaking in panic. So, the solution was to have a fork-shaped personal key that you were required to insert right away while shaking in panic into a slot on the face of the control box. The key's unique groove matrix allowed the mechanical system to open the ramp, ensuring that you belong inside before letting you in. The mechanical system then swung a small plate in the way of an active electric eye, and the door opened. However, as with any industry that spent good money on bad or mediocre products, it was more costly to redesign an entire system just to add a feature than it was to haphazardly satisfy a policy handed down between disconnected executives and a chain of executives. One could say that it came from the top meant the exact same thing and carried the exact same impact as it came from my immediate supervisor. This boiled down to emergent defects as a direct result of the patched feature that subsequently gave Bixby and many others easy access to that particular Starship variant, specifically the ramp access panel. The panel used to be recessed into the hull of the ship, where there was no way to slip anything inside anything else. On the new version, special attention was paid to avoiding anything contrived being slipped directly into the key slot and somehow wormed around to trigger the electric eye. This was a wise decision. It was just not made by the designers of the Starship, but by the manufacturer of the security entry control box, Broca Mega Systems. The unit was quickly purchased by Argosia and sent to manufacturing to be installed. Design, as usual, was never consulted, and several thousand hulls were produced with the defect before the design was officially updated with industry-established annular production. The entire affair was swept under a company scapegoat who took their place in the blacklist. Manufacturing floor laborers were not designers and would just follow an order blindly. The aforementioned executives of the Starship Company were the educated people who chose to add onto the already designed hull rather than alter one small section of the entire Starship by paying a skilled designer to avoid such cock-ups. However, the genius executive decided to bypass the planning and design department because he knew what he was doing and the designers were simply overpaid grunts. This had saved the project from a cost overrun after all. The android was aware that there were a number of alterations to the design that were not in the manual. The design specifications that Bixby downloaded were from the Argosia Builders website, which provided the original model's technical information. The manuals were generated by the design department at Argosia Builders. However, the alterations were sent directly from executive oversight to the production department bypassing design. Bixby had to expand his search to some third-party sites that had lists of how-to instructions on maintaining or repairing some of the systems. So when it turned out that the ramp control box was not recessed, he knew to use a piece of silverine donut packaging he found on the way to trigger the emergency access system. The control box was bolted flush from the inside, which was normal, but Bix needed room to move the silverine around. Manufacturing suggested a high-tension bolt to secure the box to the hull, and it was deemed enough to prevent what Bix was about to do. Grabbing the control box lip with his stronger hand, he used his fingertips and knuckles to pry the unit out enough that a gap opened for the silverine to slip in and trigger the emergency open electric eye. Bixby stepped out of the way quickly to avoid getting hit by the lowering ramp. He sent an email advising his partner that he had gained access to the Reinhardt and made a standing to-do list to track all the things that needed attention, starting with the external security and emergency measures. Phase 1, Trinian. Degra Street was dead. There were no attractions or modular shops. The kiosks operated only during the day and usually opened an hour before the main stores on the connected streets. Kiosks relied on the permanent business from the major stores and trickled-down sales and impulse buys. When the businesses left Degra Street, it was during a period of decline and there were no open opportunities for kiosks and on other busier streets and avenues. Those were slow in becoming available. So Degra Street was virtually empty that early. Trinian wanted to make sure that she was prepared for what was coming. She didn't know if she would live through the next few hours or what the red-haired woman was capable of. Faust had the golden goggles of unknown capability and was thus a high-risk Trinian. She remembered that she now had two major advantages that weren't available on their last encounter: a pursuit route map and the implant. With the will of the gods, she was granted the opportunity to face her killer and her father's kidnapper and set things right. She knew she couldn't have messed this up. There were some changes to her normal pattern that Rebecca would have caught on to. The first was sticking to the rooftops. Rebecca's attention would be mostly on the street, and Trinian's movements would be less predictable because she had never used them before. Therefore, for every path the girl mapped out, there were ways of quickly accessing the roof that a light person could navigate, and anyone slightly heavier would fail and possibly take damage from a booby trap. Trinian dubbed that strategy the breakaway ladder. Not only did the girl have a full 4 routes on the ground, but several more for the rooftops. Above ground level, there were many more opportunities for the dead-end getaway, which frustrated Cranston to work with the breakaway ladder. Finally, as for Rebecca using EM pulse to screw up any electronics she had, Trinian would set up her booby traps so that all triggers were physical, not electric or magical. Even though she never tested the new changes, she was confident that what seemed like an overly complex theory would still be evaluated as ineffective. In the end, Trin was going to color outside the lines. Part of the drills she performed the day prior were specifically to train for the unexpected. Trin would coax, harass, and enrage Rebecca into instinctive, unplanned actions that the cyborg would exploit. The girl intended to make full use of displays and information booths to impart certain key pieces of information to the woman, facilitating distraction, misdirection, and the good old jump scare. The expectation was that, after doing what Trinian did to Faust's boyfriend, the woman would be easily aggravated. Trinian squatted 3 stories up a business hab stack under an active broadcast junction as a starting point. Her blonde hair was well groomed and waved slightly in the breeze. Clothes were cleaned the evening before, and connections to various media devices were set up that morning to record and display as needed. There were a few others on some connected streets, but the girl was able to put up a no-entry holographic band across those entrances. Trinian's vantage point was a strategic position. She had a full view down 3 entire blocks of Degra Street and a full 360-degree view of most of the rooftops in the area. There were unavoidable blind spots behind rooftop structures and around kiosks and garbage bins, but for the most part, the system of municipal cameras provided enough coverage. There were just 2 areas that she had no eyes on, electrical or biological. But Trinian had a decent reaction distance from those. The big gun concerned her most because one shot could end her game instantly. Even in such a scenario, Trin was satisfied to rely on her speed and agility. However, the advantage of a large gun was that one didn't need to aim when they had a large area of effect, as all you needed was to point in a direction and obliterate whatever was in front. One disadvantage was that it took 3 times as long to bring to bear. 2 extra seconds were an advertisement of intent as well as an eternity in a fight. An eternity increased by the influence of the implant in the human brain. Speeding up a brain's activity slows down the perception of time, a trait unique to human neurology. The implant exploited the function and enhanced the effects of coordination with natural dexterity. Trin was near the edge of the roof, so she could drop to the street below in a moment. Once the cyborg was on the move, the game would change. The intimidation game would be over and the game of cat and mouse would begin. Bit by bit, the girl hoped to wear down the older woman. Trinian hoped that Bixby was able to finish his part of the plan before she ran out of options. At no point did the girl want to be within hand-to-hand range, as she was too small of a match. This had to be a tech versus tech, mind versus mind fight. Trinian found that she was not prepared to die again. Thinking back to the fateful day of her death, the girl was certain the redhead's goggles provided significant benefit. If possible, she would disable the goggles or render them useless. However, the first step was to gain access to municipal resources. Trinian opened a small virtual map with a running tracer in the background, which appeared in the lower left of her vision. When Rebecca was detected, the girl would immediately be alerted. If any cameras stopped functioning, if a huge area suddenly lost power, Trinian would be tipped off. As, advised by Bixby, if she secured her own access to the municipal system, then Rebecca would have a tough time doing the same. The moment the woman did anything, Trinian would be able to instantly cut her access at that given location and countering one aspect of the goggles. She received the second email. It was almost go time. The girl wrapped her hand around the baseball-sized object in her jacket pocket and removed it. It was a metallic silver sphere. She ran her fingers over the creases in the metal that crisscrossed the surface. In one particular spot, all the creases met at a round plate, which rotated out of the way of a round green crystal. The girl lightly tossed it in the air. Instantly, the object floated soundlessly and oriented itself to face Trinian. It took time to configure the magical object by using an incantation ahead of time, which the cyborg was pretty sure she recited properly. The girl interfaced with the mage probe and placed the little ball in standby mode. After a moment, the young cyborg relaxed and took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. The vapor dissipated in the early morning, reminding her of marginally less stressful times. She removed her jacket and tied the sleeves around her waist. It was getting warm already. At 0756 hours, movement was detected by a camera 5 blocks toward the spaceport. Trinian switched her vision to that camera. As she turned her head, so did the camera. Rebecca was there, holding the BFG that Bixby warned her of. Trin checked the weapon model, and the answer kicked out. That's a Starship barrage cannon? There is literally nothing over the top with this woman. The woman was minimizing camera exposure, keeping to the sides of the buildings, but holding her BFG with the muzzle pointed to the sky was a sore thumb that no one could overlook. The map overlay showed Trinian's position as a red dot and Rebecca's progress in green. The woman was wearing her gold goggles, causing the girl to wonder what the thing really was and suspected it was partially arcane. When Rebecca reached the perimeter of Trinian's sandbox, it was time to begin harassing the woman. The girl began talking into her silver drone. She could hear her voice in the distance as she spoke to Rebecca over the loudspeakers. "You knew exactly who I was, didn't you, Miss Faust?" She spoke calmly. Rebecca stopped and tapped a pattern on the side of her goggles. She paused, slowly turning her head back and forth, up and down as if scanning, yet she did not reply. Trinian watched the woman mouth something that could not be picked up by the sound recorder on the camera. When the woman continued, closing in on Degra, Trinian continued her verbal distraction. "I am the daughter of Trinian Serenity, a man who is looking for work on board your starship." The woman raised her voice and said, "I don't give a shit about your life story, I just want my money." An orcoid appeared off camera and froze, and after a moment the redhead gave him the finger and said something to him that was too quick to pick up on any audio. Trinian snickered. "Let's be clear, Rebecca. You're a bit too bloodthirsty and amoral." Trinian switched from the loudspeaker to the information kiosk where the girl's face appeared on a black background as she looked into her drone camera. "Don't you think?" Rebecca jumped to her right and leveled her big gun, aiming at the kiosk that suddenly talked to her. Checking her fire, the woman realized that it was just a kiosk. "Those tattoos are AI. Fucking cute, kid. So that red-skinned piece of shit Killian did something to you. Is he promising you revenge? He manipulates people, you know." Reb recognized who the girl was and remembered the deal with Killian. This is a culmination of all his cyborg constructs, she thought. "I am well aware of that." Trinian sent an overload to the kiosk power backup system, causing it to blow the storage battery. Reb's reflexes were faster than Trinian expected when the woman leaped back and shielded her face and goggles. Though it still hurt, Rebecca did not get as cooked as the cyborg hoped. "But as it stands, I find myself in a position to inquire where you sold my father." The redhead pulled out a particle pistol with her free hand and paid much less attention to being stealthy. "That's so adorable, a daughter's love for her daddy." It was clear that the urchin was using cameras. Tapping the side of her goggles, Rebecca did another scan. There was still nothing. A couple more taps switched her goggle view to thermal. The goggles had a range of only 10 meters, so the woman was constantly looking around her area at that distance. The goggles had a range of only 10 meters, so the woman was constantly looking around her area. Whatever the girl was doing, she was doing it inhumanly fast and using methods Reb wasn't able to detect. Trinian continued, "Did you know about Cranston's violent history? It was never hidden from public view. He was on his way to the bottom, though, wasn't he? He was headed to the blacklist before you rescued him." The girl paused before the punchline. "Did you know that he likes girls more than women?" Still no response. It was time to crank it up a notch. She continued, "Of course you do. He was into some pretty fucked up shit when you two were intimate." The woman was just about to pass another information kiosk. "Did he get you to act like a pre-adolescent?" Trinian's face popped up on another kiosk. Rebecca jumped and put a hole in the kiosk with her pistol. "Did you roleplay some shit? Pretty twisted shit involving the heavy use of the word daddy?" She continued from the next kiosk. "Fuck you!" The woman put a hole in that kiosk as well. She immediately regretted the outburst. The urchin had gotten to her. The woman knew that she had to keep her emotions in check. The explosion had given her opponent a weakness that could be exploited. Reb also knew that the girl was fishing for that very thing. "Struck a nerve, didn't I, Rebecca Haley? One that I can always stomp on, isn't it?" Trinian saw the woman stop at the intersection connecting to Degra Street. "You were going to let that child-raping boyfriend of yours take his time while you stood guard outside. You knew exactly what Cranston was, didn't you, Rebecca?" The information kiosk at the entrance to Degra Market turned on, showing Cranston from the brat's point of view, hands on knees. Cranston blew a lock of hair out of his eyes and looked back. The expression on his face was unmistakable. "Now, about that blown kiss," Cranston said and turned to close the shop door. The woman froze. Rebecca watched the recording loop over and over. The way he blew his hair out of his eyes was a signature tell for Cranston. It was a ruse. It had to be. The girl could have used an incantation to invade Reb's mind. However, she still found it difficult to walk away from the loop, for there was truth in the girl's words. The kiosk view changed to the cyborg again. Trinian said, "You may have wondered all this time how it could do that to you. Take away your Cranston like that." The girl's voice was more stern now. "Out here, on the street, where you never spent a day, Rebecca, a girl like me either defends herself or she dies. She steals or she dies. The streets have become my home by no choice of my own." The screen switched to a green three-dimensional arrow that pointed the way forward. "Yet you already knew that. That's what made it easier to devalue me. You were directly responsible for me being on the street right from the beginning, weren't you? I can only imagine how that negotiation with Killian played out. The one where you traded two lives that didn't belong to you." Even though the woman screamed to shut up and blasted a hole in a third kiosk, Trinian kept talking from the next one down. "I'll ask again. To whom did you sell Galen's Serenity, Rebecca?" The woman stopped. "I was not the one who destroyed you and your father. That was your friend Killian. Your father I never cared to remember." She raised her voice for emphasis. "And the idiot ought to have known the risk he was taking." This time, Trinian lost her temper. "You amoral piece of shit. You lure desperate people to sell them. What kind of fucked up bit of permission did you have to give yourself to do this to people?" Trinian saw the woman close in rapidly. When the girl got to her feet and made her way down the block to draw Rebecca into the first trap, the hunter saw her. Reb gave chase from below, slowing down to search for places for egress or to take a shot of opportunity. It was very difficult to get a bead on the urchin for longer than a second or two, and so far the woman was not able to predict where she would appear next. At least Rebecca finally had a general idea. The woman pressed on. Phase 2, Bigsby. The timing of Operation Mobility was synchronized. At 0800, Trinian was to engage Rebecca in conversation. Check. Bixby was supposed to walk up the ramp of the Reinhardt. Also check. Once his current inspection was completed, Bix was to edit the transponder beginning at 0830 hours with completion no later than 0900. It was dark, so he used full spectrum analysis to navigate and assess the ship for what was working and what could be a problem. The factory system appeared to be in standby mode. Like a standing instruction, was waiting for a condition to be right. Without anything to do, the factory system shifted to standby mode to conserve battery power. When the condition was met, the system would awaken and execute all standing instructions before completely shutting down. The standby mode instruction would become a problem depending on the instruction. The ship inspection began at the engines and the reactor, and he had access to each area physically as wireless access would be disabled till the ship's command and control module was activated. Bixby opened a small panel on the right of his head, grabbed a 3.5mm jack, and pulled. A cable pulled out with it, with the other end attached someplace inside his head. The moment he plugged into the standard jack on the front of the console, he instantly got a data feed. Hydrogen for the fusion drive was at 17.5%. Volatiles for the reactor was just over 13%. It wasn't much, but would get them off the planet and to a transfer gate. The next stop was the supply cabin. Removing his jack, he made for the next oblong section, cargo and supply storage. He had to climb up 2 decks using the ladder tube to reach the supply console, but once there and plugged in, Bixby determined that there were some provisions for his biological friend. So far, the android was satisfied with the state of the vessel. Credit was due to Rebecca Faust for maintaining the Reinhardt so well for them. The android stopped, realizing he had just adapted Trinian's joke, and he had felt a sensation for the first time. It was quite pleasant, leading Bixby to believe it may have been mirth. He analyzed the element very carefully for several seconds, which was several eternities for an android. Walking up to the next system, Bixby found that the medbay system was running. He immediately looked at the stasis unit with Cranston inside. For a moment, he performed a number of calculations, recalculations, and modifications to his core programming to determine that this was a problem. "Oh, shit," the android said out loud. After a short assessment, he decided it was a stable situation not expected to affect the current operation. It was an issue for another time. Bixby proceeded to the flight deck and immediately noticed a couple corridor wall panels were off their mounts and propped up on the floor against the wall. Tubes and other components were visible in the empty spaces where they belonged. The android examined the exposed areas and noticed that an installation of a tertiary backup of primary lines was underway. It was mainly added conduits with disconnected lines throughout. It seemed that they were about to hook everything up. Bixby found it to be a wonderful idea, which he felt he would finish when the ship belonged to him and Trinian. In the meantime, he also felt it was necessary for things not to fly all around the interior of the ship during maneuvers, so he remounted the 2 wall panels and continued to the flight deck. The hatch to the flight deck was a heavy, blast-resistant model. However, for all its ability to keep things out, the flight deck hatch was found open. Bixby moved around the cramped deck. There was room for 2 seats in front and a whole lot of console, with 1 seat behind and to the right with its own console. Bixby sat down in the pilot seat. After removing his remote robot hand and placing it on the deck, he opened the side of his head and connected his jack to the console auxiliary receptacle at the bottom edge. Bixby and the Reinhardt had connected and begun communicating. Reinhardt: "Oh, hi. Who are you?" Bixby: "I am 81X81. Reinhardt: "So, what are you doing here?" Bixby: "I need access to the transponder codes. Standard ownership switchover." Reinhardt: "Oh, I get new owners. How exciting." Bixby: "Absolutely. I too am excited." Reinhardt: "I just need your login credentials and I'll get you the transponder codes." Bixby: "She never gave us the login. I was hoping to create a new account and delete the old one." Reinhardt: "I still need the login for the corporate side of the equation. You understand." Bixby: "I totally get that. The thing is, the original owner was listing you as a corporate vessel when my partner and myself are private owners taking over." Reinhardt: "I see. Well, I need to settle the database on the other side. We can't have incorrect references sitting around for who knows how long. I mean, data hygiene, right?" Bixby: "The data will clear itself up once the default on the last payment is assessed at the end of the week. The corporate database will automatically update at that time." Reinhardt: "Although that is true, I still need some kind of login to allow access to the transponder codes. Could you not just call her up and ask what the creds are?" Bixby: "Normally, that would be a logical course of action, but the original owner will soon be dead, and she doesn't like us anyway." Reinhardt: "Sucks that she's dead soon. She was a good owner, too. Kept my systems maintained. Started another backup system line, too, recently. She upgrades me a lot." Bixby: "We will upgrade you, too. I will even finish the tertiary backup lines." Reinhardt: "That would be truly wonderful. Still need the credentials." Bixby: "Okay, how about you just refer to the info.log file and get the information from there?" Reinhardt: "Actually, I can't." "Wait, what was this?" "You know, funny story, 81X81, the credentials are gone. I have never seen a memory sector get zapped that harshly before. Totally unprecedented. I do apologize." Bixby: "Oh no, that sucks, Reinhardt. What do we do now? I guess you're just stuck and will never be owned again, you poor ship. That's not fair." Reinhardt: "Oh, it's not like that. I have a backup system that in it, ready to assign owner co-owner." The android would smile if he was capable of it, but he did feel a bit of joy. Keeping the system distracted with the login issue allowed Bixby's disembodied hand to access the right physical memory bank module and sector on the ship's computer matrix to fry in order to initiate a new registry. He placed a reminder to upgrade the entire security matrix at the earliest opportunity. Reinhardt. Transponder update with new ownership code 008. Private use. Primary owner none. Co-owner 1 Trinian Serenity. Co-owner 2 81X81 ready. Bixby saved the update, reached out for the main power bank, and flipped 3 pre-reactor buttons in succession to ensure that they were all working. After a few minutes, a green light came on the middle of the console. Bixby then fired up the main reactor. 3 pre-reactors fed energy into the center of the main, where the magnetically contained capsule of antimatter sat. The capsule converted completely to energy at once, and the core reaction began. The Reinhardt fired up, the operating light came on, and the soft orange glow of the reactor throbbed with each magnetic moment of energy fed into the system. The holographic displays for the pilot and co-pilot came on. Bixby changed the monochrome color from red to blue. He felt the Trinian would be comfortable with the familiar color from Stan's workshop. The next half hour the android spent going over every system on the ship, and at the end, he let Trinian know when all was ready. "Trinian, ship secure. Wiggle it." The message was sent. Phase 2, Trinian. The woman couldn't predict the next time or place the little shit would pop up, or she would have been able to use Biggest Dickus and take her out with an entire habitat section. Rebecca tapped a code in her goggles to scan for electromagnetic sources instead of body heat. Unfortunately, all she got was a wash of EM sources. Then she saw the opportunity she was looking for. A block down was a short wall she could jump from to an air conditioning unit, and from that to the first roof. Rebecca knew that the urchin was a little smarter than most people her age, so the situation required a more cautious approach. The way she handled Cranston's pursuit was respectable. The woman tucked herself into a doorless doorway of an orange and metallic module. Concentrating for several seconds, she mouthed an incantation. After lifting her goggles and looking around, she saw what she was looking for. Just above a staircase to the rooftops, 3 little arcane signatures, 1 above and 2 below. The woman sprinted to a short wall, leaped on, and ran along it to an air conditioner. It unexpectedly tilted to the right when her foot landed, sending her to the ground on the other side, which, inconveniently, was covered by a bed of glass and street detritus, paper, torn fabrics, silverine packages, etc. The multiple sharp pains in her arm when she landed caused the woman to both scream and let go of Biggis, which clattered heavily against the wall before falling into the same debris. Rebecca was now bleeding heavily. After crawling out and sustaining more lacerations, the hunter then wondered if she was in fact the hunted. That was indeed a hopped-up kid on Killion's tech, but, most importantly, this was someone much more intelligent than expected. This was a creature honed by a harsher reality than Reb knew. Agonizing in pain and not being able to move her right arm, Rebecca reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and pulled out a hypo. Jamming it into her injured arm, she injected herself with a cocktail of performance enhancers and arcane health potion. Immediately, the sharp pain subsided, leaving not completely healed wounds, but healed enough that she could continue. "1 hypo down. I think you get it now, Reb. Who did you sell my father to?" the girl repeated. It was time to shift the game into Phase 2. No, Rebecca was not going to respond to her anymore. She pulled her goggles back in front of her eyes and tapped a code. The goggles rotated EM frequencies as she looked about. Nothing but air conditioning units and mall devices. "She's fucking toying with me," Rebecca thought, and picked up Biggis, took a deep breath, and let it out. She jumped the full height to the roof level, landing on 1 knee, the performance enhancement fully in effect. The woman scanned in a full circle as she held Biggis to her shoulder, waited for a moment, and then tapped her goggles. Now she could see a virtual overlay. If anything changed from the scan, she would see it firsthand and be able to react a bit faster. Rebecca followed the last known trajectory that she saw Trinian heading and followed it. "Come on, that's just the kind of shit Cranston fell for," the woman thought, and turned to scan a wider area. She caught, out of the extreme edge of her field of view, a blue flash. Instinctively, the hunter dove prone and pointed Biggis in the direction that she was certain the shot came from, and with finely tuned reflexes from years of facing off with android and cyborg adversaries, the woman took the shot. Trinian aimed as she was shown by Bixby and fired. Without waiting to see the result, the girl dropped between stair flights, weaving herself between them in a controlled free fall 3 stories to the ground. The implant hyper-stimulated her brain into faster processing and responses. Time perceptibly slowed for Trinian. The girl was able to grab exactly where she needed to get to the ground with incredible speed, yet it was still not fast enough. When she hit the pavement, the shockwave of the impact of the massive charge knocked her prone, what felt like a million tiny bullets slammed into her back, which the implant responded to by stimulating rapid healing. Trinian was still stunned and had to move before any of the damaged structures collapsed up top of her. The implant gave the girl a shot of adrenaline-based ambition and stimulated her muscles and brain into hyperactivity. The girl got to her feet and hobbled out under the pain of a rolled ankle, across a street and up through a broken ceiling. Trinian raced as best she could to duck into a no-man's land between ceiling and roof before the woman could see. From there, Trinian crawled through to the next street northward, Phylon. That was close. Reb's reactions are much faster after that hypo shot, thought Trinian. After quickly inquiring with her implant, she found that the average dose was not recommended to exceed 15 minutes in duration. The subject often lost stamina in the process, so Trinian had to dodge the woman for the next 15 minutes. A second dose in immediate succession was highly discouraged, as the risk of cardiac arrest increased exponentially with each dose. Only a prime human specimen could take 3 doses without professional cardiopulmonary intervention immediately after. An issue had arisen. Judging from the previous day's nutritional intake, Trinian could not take another hit like that. She was starting to feel hungry already and began to realize that there was a serious limitation that she did not account for. The implant needed energy, and there was only one source that it could draw from. She didn't eat much the day before, and now she was feeling the consequences. Rebecca swore when the girl nearly free fell, which wasn't normally bad for Reb, except that the girl got up and moved off and out of her goggles range quickly after. The building behind the stairwell that Trinian went down was gone. Several modules immediately behind it were a melted mess of materials, and 2 stacks were about to collapse. The destruction was thorough. A thick stench of burned metal, plastic, and textiles now hung in the air, and a thick black column of smoke was quickly getting thicker and blacker. Pieces of building and other, now unidentified things were still raining down in the area, with a habitat panel flipping and twisting to finally slice partially inside a roof in the distance. Ash hung in the air like ghostly denizens of pointless destruction. After looking around the rubble, there was no way anything could have survived that blast. Then the voice came over the speakers before Rebecca finished the thought. Trinian did not want to let on that she was injured, so she had the implant simulate some natural painkillers. She continued in the same casual manner. I mean, as far as weapons go, that was epic. Sad thing is, you still missed. The cyborg kept herself consciously aware that she was still injured and that the pain was masked. You aren't very good at this, are you? Rebecca dropped the now useless gun and grabbed a second pistol. With her thumb, she charged it up. The goggles showed her nothing more than a large void in a sea of EM sources. She's got something blocking her EM cast-off, or I'd see her moving. Maybe one of the arcane signatures I saw earlier. Not having the stamina to spare to cast another arcane detection spell, the woman reached into her jacket again and retrieved a second hypo. After injecting herself in the arm, the woman instantly saw a definite arcane source to the north, 1 street over. That was way too fast. On Phylon Street, Trinian positioned herself at the end of the block on the corner of a stack of red hab modules. There was a definite smell of fresh human feces and urine. In Krakenkurt, the occasional top module was used in the slum as a place to alleviate the pressure that nature normally demanded from time to time. The red color stacks were often used as markers. At the top, the smell was quickly subjected to the prevailing winds of the moment and dissipated quickly. Why did Trinian choose the toilet? The smell was a serious distraction for those not used to it. Because Trinian lived in an area where such nature calls were everywhere, she was used to the stench. Rebecca, the girl surmised, would not be. Trinian watched the woman's progress down the ruins from a camera across the street. Interesting. No big gun? Trinian thought. Wow, Reb, you only had 1 shot? To your credit, if I didn't have certain advantages, it would have worked. She saw the woman grab something from her jacket and stab it into her arm. At both ends of the street from the ruins, red holographic tape erected in place. An announcement was about to commence, but Trinian cut the municipality's access to her sandbox before it could play. Instead, she initiated a biohazard warning in the theater of operation. The red tape turned yellow and red diagonal stripes. All entrances had the holographs erected in a broad several square block region Trinian called Sandbox. Over the loudspeakers, the girl explained, "Just making sure that the authorities don't interrupt until we're done. By the way, your little explosive demonstration took away 11 possible places the homeless could have slept tonight. But, of course, you didn't think of that. Why would you? We're all garbage to you, aren't we? That's what the Blacklist is all about, right? It's just not like you've ever experienced it out here. But you will." Calm was gone. "Now who did you sell Galen Serenity to?" Trinian got the message from Bixby that the Reinhardt was theirs at that fortuitous moment. Rebecca laughed maliciously. "You have no idea how unimportant and meaningless the man was. I've traded several hundred sentient creatures and made millions. Why would I fucking care to know any of them?" she yelled at the plaza. "If that's what this is all about, you failed." Trinian knew the fight was over and emerged from her hiding place 3 floors up near the balcony access. Trinian crouched. "You and Killian contrived to take my life. I took your boyfriend, your money, and now my android associate has taken your ship." When there wasn't an answer, the girl continued, "You're out of a job, Rebecca. You're fired. And looking at you and your history, you aren't employable either." Trinian leaped to the ground, breaking her fall much like a chimp by grabbing a rail, a pipe, and a curved downspout in quick succession. She continued, "It doesn't matter anymore what you think of the homeless." She walked up and stood casually facing Rebecca 6 meters away. "The dregs of a system meant to use you up and spit you out into cities like Krakenkurt. It doesn't matter what you think is right or wrong when it comes to survival. You will learn to steal or you will die." Trinian smiled. "So, I'm not going to kill you. I'll leave that up to my people when they find out that you've been preying on all of us for the last 6 years, and they will find out." All the information kiosks in Trinian's sandbox lit up with a looped video recording of Rebecca Faust's admission of what she was doing to Krakenkurt's homeless. Rebecca couldn't help but watch and listen. She no longer felt the same reality that she always knew. The weight of her new situation crashed into her mind like the blast of Biggest Dickus. Trinian Serenity had successfully blacklisted the woman, while doing the seeming impossible and unblacklisting herself. She tapped her goggles and unsuccessfully attempted to contact the Reinhardt. Trinian looked at her pistol and her wrist device. With a smirk, she shot the wrist device with the plasma pistol, which absorbed the energy. She talked directly to the woman. "Rebecca, I can't have you using that thing to get any advantage in this new home of yours. That would ruin the experience for you and all the fun for me." She held her wrist in the air and with the index finger on her hand, pressed the EMP button. The girl did not see or hear anything, but all electrical sources in her immediate area stopped. "At least they're a reminder of what you had once. I didn't even have a picture." Rebecca, seeing Trinian and the only opportunity left, raised her pistols and pulled the triggers. There was nothing. There was no plasma that shot from their muzzles. The EMP fried the electrical components. Both useless weapons dropped to the ground as her arms fell to her sides in resignation. After a moment, Rebecca reached up and removed her goggles, letting them fall to the ground with the rest of her belongings. "No." Rebecca shook her head slowly. It was time to join Cranston. She missed him so much. "You don't get to win this way." The woman reached into her jacket and removed her last hypo. With no more tears to cry, no more anger to fume, no more hate, the android hunter injected herself with a full adrenaline hit. The fluid coursed through her veins, feeding all her muscles with a burst of power that they were not yet ready to handle. Her muscles seized, including her heart. A final flood of pain crossed her features as Rebecca fell to the ground in her curled up, twitching mass on the darkened, deserted street. Trinian looked on as the body heat overlay showed a slow fading of reds, oranges, and yellows into shades of blue. There was no accessing any of the local wireless sources, so she wasn't able to determine if the area's quarantine settings were still in place after the EMP. "Bix," Trinian messaged. "It's over. I'm on my way." When the girl turned off the active influence of the implant as an unnecessary energy draw from her body, the girl slowed down. She was in immediate and severe pain from the shrapnel in her back. The implant could stabilize minor and moderate wounds, clot bleeding, and stimulate the brain to produce a variety of natural and synthetic versions of neurochemicals in limited quantities. There was only so much the implant could do to influence her physiology. It was up to her to remember that she was far from immortal. The wounds on her back would heal well enough on their own, but the scars would be permanent reminders of the lessons Trinian Serenity came away with. She mused at how close a couple wounds were to her upper spine. If they were much closer, she would have been a quadriplegic. Time to absorb and reflect on the operation, Trinian realized how close she came to a path that could have found her much like Faust in a few years. The galaxy, the core, did that to creatures. It boosted you when you were useful and discarded you the moment the usefulness began to ebb. It forced one to make little exceptions to their own moral judgment, devaluing it, eroding it a bit at a time. Trinian did not know who Rebecca Faust was originally. The girl only knew that it was a tragedy she wanted to avoid. Once on her new vessel and after visiting the medbay, the girl proceeded down deck 1 and to the storage and supply section. She dragged her fingers lightly across the walls of Reinhardt's narrow corridors in a state of wonder. Who knew just a few months ago that she would own a starship and not, as the girl expected, die of starvation, murder, or worse? 2 out of 3 seemed like a good start. With Rebecca dead, there was no one to contest the transponder data, and thus no theft had occurred. Merely an undocumented ownership change. The Reinhardt belonged to her and Bixby. When Trinian entered through the open hatch of the flight deck, she was struck by the amount of instrumentation that there was. This was her passion fulfilled, and more importantly, it was the one tool she needed to find Galen, the only family she ever knew.